not necessarily push the envelope, but be open to it. And those signs exist all the time because, as you know, having been over there and experienced the other side and kicking and screaming, not wanting to come back, that everything's fine. This is the play. We're all actors in this play, and we play a role, and each one of us has a unique role. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Lewis. I am the founder and co-creator of Near Death Network on YouTube. Our channel has just dropped, but I have a diverse background in broadcasting. My longtime career was a sportscaster in local news in a variety of different markets across the country. I was here in Phoenix for the past 20 years on air, but I've also had an interest in spiritual metaphysical topics ever since I was young. And after reading Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, several years ago, it really piqued my interest about the near-death experience, but also had a pretty diverse background in medical intuitives, psychics, angels, a wide variety of topics. So I was drawn to IANDS specifically about 7 years ago when we reached out to Jan Holden, president of IANDS, to ask if she would participate in a trailer for a television series that we were pitching at the time. It was called Alive Again. And when you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see the trailer for that show. Then COVID happened. So we had to park that and put it on the shelf. And the natural evolution of our ability to produce meaning my buddies who I worked with in the TV station here in Phoenix, Bud Davy and Ed Oliver in the news department. They were photographers and wonderful producers. They joined forces with me and we started to produce content. So we have a wealth of content that's pretty diverse around the near-death experience. We're going to be dropping a panel approach that involves a lot of the names that you're familiar with in this space. Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, Jeff Olsen, Barbara Bartolome, as well as Ellen Weir and Brooke Grove, and many more as we go forward with the channel. The real goal here is, in my opinion, the life review in the near-death experience is really salient for those of us who won't have near-death experiences. I mean, there's anywhere from 5 to 15% of the world's population that have near-death experiences, which is not insignificant. So that's 380 to 1.2 billion people in the world have had some form of a near-death experience. However, the balance of us not necessarily have experienced that type of an experience. So the key, I think, in the channel, what we're attempting to do is to provide information as a primer from those of you who have crossed the veil and come back, the pioneers of consciousness, as you were, to give us some tips that we can use going forward in life beyond everything is love. It's wonderful. You get to the other side. You don't want to come back. Those things are all very interesting on background. But what are the practical applications for people who have not had a near-death experience? How can they make their lives more joyous while they're on this plane of existence, not only for themselves and those they interact with, but for society as a whole? So I think that's where we are with our project. There's a lot of great information out there, a lot of people who are doing great work, but we feel that we bring a unique perspective, having come from traditional broadcasting. And also my background as a sportscaster enabled me to develop relationships with a lot of sports figures and entertainment figures that we plan to weave into the podcast that we will produce. It'll be called What's Death Got to Do with It? Kind of pick the brains of these individuals and see where they are in the spectrum on life and death. And I think you'll find those insights intriguing. Guys like Charles Barkley, Alice Cooper, Nathan Fillion, kind of a cross section of entertainment and sports figures. So we're going to have a pretty diverse amount of content that will drop going forward. And we appreciate the opportunity to work with IANDS because they are the record of organization in this space and have been for quite some time. I would say, having met Betty, and I told her this, and we'll discuss it, I'm sure, at IANDS conference this past September here in Phoenix, that people like her and her age group and the demographic that she represents are very important, because this is a very challenging time on the planet right now. And any insights that Betty and those in her age group can offer her peers, I think will be very instrumental in bringing us forward, hopefully, in a new age of more reasonableness, more compassion, more love, and more caring.
I love when people make me feel young. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing so much. So I want to ask you about, you've devoted a lot of time to opening up awareness around this topic. I love the fact that you're talking to sports people about it, because that's just, two combinations of worlds that you wouldn't ever think of. What do you think? What are some of your personal thoughts around death and life and consciousness and what comes next?
Well, if I could give a shout out to Jeff Jansen, I believe you know him, but he's written several books that pertain to the near-death experience. He was close. He didn't have an official near-death experience, but he was, I think, motivated and directed to get into this space by a real scare with a heart attack for him at age 42. Jeff's written several books that concentrate on the life review and the ripple effect. Personally, when I delved more into that, not only from your perspective as experiencers, but to really kind of look back in my life to those who I had wronged, it made me very circumspect. And so I asked Jeff Olsen, who was a co-host of our pilot, how to best atone to people like that, who, for whatever reason, immaturity or just not being on board mentally, that I've offended in my life, and to try and make amends that way, because there's so many people, I'm sure, that I don't really have contact information for that I could reach out to directly. I think it's important, based on what the life reviews show us, that kaleidoscopic interaction with every sentient being we've ever had in our lives, to show us from an instructional standpoint that there were times when we could have been better, but there were a lot of times where we really lifted people up with benign acts that we didn't think were so important. For example, I stop and help an elderly lady change her tire, and she was going to purchase a firearm. Her husband had just died. She was very disconsolate and depressed. But by my act of kindness in helping her out on the side of the road, she turned her life around. She founded a 501c3. She impacted thousands of people. And so those types of events, and that was just an example, it's not a real occurrence, but those types of events shape who we are as a planet and individually, collectively, to help bring us into the next age in a more unified effort to help each other out. And I know you know Vinnie Tolman, and I talked with him at the IANDS conference too. And I said, Vinnie, how do you explain to people, with all of the negativity and vitriol that's going on in the world today, how do you handle it? How do you address it? What are some practical insights? For example, when somebody cuts you off in traffic, instead of flipping them off, you just back off and you say, they must be having a bad day. Well, Vinnie said, I look at that person and I say, wow, Vinnie's having a bad day. Because we're all the same. We're all of the same composition, but we're all unique. So to be able to set your day up going forward before you get out into the madness of the world and say, when these events cross my plate or my vision, I react in a way that's compassionate and understanding, and try to stay in a neutral spot as opposed to one of condemnation.
Wow. I love that. Yep. Betty's having a bad day. But I'm projecting it onto other people because I like doing that too.
Yeah, but you have a beautiful smile, and that takes it away for the rest of us. So
Thank you. I paid for this. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that there's so much rich information, and I love that you're connecting with so many people and that you're so accepting of it. Tell me about your life growing up. Was spirituality a part of it? How did you get into this whole realm?
I don't really know exactly when it happened, but I was raised um, back I was born in the 50s, so I'm long in the tooth, like so many of us who are fortunate to still be here. But I was in a family, two other brothers, my mom and dad, in Sacramento, California. My father, it turns out, got divorced from my mother when I was in college because he came out as gay, which was a very traumatic thing for him in the 50s, a gay man in the 50s to be able to live his life. But it really was a lot of turbulence in our life. But my dad was always a thinker. He was an educator and was open to these types of experiences. So I think I formulated my own philosophy based on traditional religion. Didn't work for me. There were increments of it when I would read the Bible that seemed more metaphysical than dogmatic. And those are the ones that I attached myself to. So when I went to college, I took Eastern religions, and it resonated more with me, to be honest with you, because the emphasis was on the Atman, or the soul. So I love Namaste, the divine in me bows to the divine in you, because we all have that component, that spark of divinity within us. But I was also very interested in UFOs, believe it or not, growing up. And I don't know what that connection is. I don't get that deep into it because it's pretty esoteric and niche. But I think that there's a lot of interesting topics out there in the metaphysical / spiritual realm that we will approach. Several of my friends are medical intuitives that have the capability to engage with the other side and bring back pretty tangible, accurate, measurable information. So rather than look the other way, I've always been interested in it. Having said that, my career was in sports. And the thing I liked about sportscasting was there's always another game. I think it's so invasive the way a news individual / reporter, like I started as, would have to come up to you and say, how did you feel when your parents committed suicide at the same time, as you articulate in the story of your life, which is very, very compelling. I think that's very invasive. And I just wasn't comfortable with it. So they call the sports department the toy department. So we enjoyed another day, another game. There's always something to look forward to. And I think that ability to have finality was intriguing to me. And obviously, as you can see, I can talk forever about what I'm passionate about. And now I'm passionate about giving this information, a wide breadth of information, to as many individuals, both in my demographic and your demographic, and even younger. I have two daughters that are 31 and 29. Wonderful. And I have a wife of 35 years, Susanna, who's enabled me to pursue this as beyond a hobby, to try and create a market segment that will serve a lot of different demographics with useful information. And the key is, I believe, and I'm sure you do, and most people in the spiritual movement, whatever their predilection is, whatever their passion is to give people an attaboy or an attagirl and lift people up. And it can be just as simple as smiling at somebody, or it can be articulating what our thoughts are about the afterlife and how it impacts our life on this planet now. Because I believe there's a lot of light workers in a lot of different functions right now, and it's all necessary for us to get the information out there so people don't think that life is futile.
You're very well spoken. I guess that comes from your years in the industry. No filler words. I really like that. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about, what do you think is coming next? What is happening for humanity?
If I knew that, I would be publishing something much more extensive. My thought is, and my hope is, that those of us like yourself, myself, and the collective that are willing to put ourselves out there in what may be characterized as this kind of a woo-woo movement in the past, is a lot more accepted now, and that we can, as a forum, help make people at least be a little bit more circumspect and not so knee-jerk. Because if you look at the political scene here in America, it's half for, half against. But who are we? We're humanity. We're a collective. This is a worldwide phenomenon, the near-death experience. And another thing that fascinates me about that is talk in the language that the individual was raised in. For example, the archetype for us in Christianity is Jesus of divinity, deity. But you may see Buddha. If you're a New Zealand Aborigine, it may be the deity that you were growing up with that represents enlightenment and getting to the next phase, whatever that may be. So I think if we can do this collectively worldwide and make it more attainable for people to identify with it. I mean, look at me. I'm a sportscaster by most people's characterization of what I did professionally, but I've always been a metaphysician. So if people like me and others and yourself can come forward in unison, I think we can at least put out the information and say, try this. Yeah, you may find this helps your daily routine. I know it does with me. And I don't always do it, by the way. If I don't set up in my mind when I leave the house that these occurrences are not going to affect me in a negative way, then I go down the rabbit hole. You know, we're all human. So I think the more you practice the insight of collective consciousness in a harmonious environment, I think we can help educate people to have that on their plate when they hit the ground, come out of bed in the morning. And perhaps if we do that and we marshal that type of temperament worldwide, then we can create the movement for good. I mean, you hear people, some say we're on the edge of doom. Some say we're close to nirvana. I think we're probably somewhere in the middle, and I hope we're leaning towards finding nirvana. But you find nirvana within, or heaven within. It's literally a concept that you put forward by your countenance and how you carry yourself on a daily basis.
It's really well said. I always say that whether you believe in doomsday or you believe in the Great Awakening, both of those things tear you away from the present moment, and that's where heaven is. So I love that you just shared that. I want to ask if there's any cool mystical experiences, signs, synchronicities, after death communication that you've experienced in your own life that you can share.
Well, you know, I don't have anything significant like you. I mean, your story is remarkable. I do recall an event when I was in college. I was working for a gentleman in Sacramento, and I asked him, can I go to Oregon? Because he had a warehouse up there. He said, sure, you can go up and work there for the summer. So I did. And I met a guy. I was playing football at the time. I was practicing kicking down at the local college in North Portland. And he invited me over to party. In the 70s were all about partying, and we partied pretty hard. And I got in my car when I probably shouldn't have, and was headed back to my place in North Portland. And I realized I'm in trouble. And then I heard a voice in my head that directed me literally street by street, turn by turn, back to the house. So I knew whomever my guide angel was at the time intervened to help me, you know, get back physically into the place where I was staying. And that really made an impact on me. And I had already had kind of a leaning towards the spiritual and metaphysical realm, but that just really kind of woke me up. And I had the experience of, however you want to characterize it, angelic or guide interaction that really made an impact on my life. And it's a first person thing, so I can share that. And I've never really shared it publicly with anybody, but I think those types of things happen to us all the time. One of the many things that we're going to discuss on the panel discussion of experts that we've compiled, and we will drop these as we go forward, is signs. So many times, as you know, more than anyone else, people who have been there and back. There's signs all the time that we don't really acknowledge because we're not open or even looking for them, not necessarily questing, but let's say, for example, my father passed away, and which he did in 2001. And then I was wanting to have some kind of interaction with him to make sure he was okay. And then I see a billboard for the Cologne Brute, which was like an Old Spice, kind of a generic aftershave that was used in the 70s that he used. And so the way I term it, at least in my arena, is that was a sign from him. He's fine. It doesn't necessarily have to be him speaking to me to authenticate the fact that he's on the other side, although that could happen as well. So I think there's a myriad of things that we can coach people on to be able to look for, not necessarily push the envelope, but be open to it. And those signs exist all the time because, as you know, having been over there and experienced the other side and kicking and screaming, not wanting to come back, that everything's fine. This is the play. We're all actors in this play, and we play a role, and each one of us has a unique role, but we have a similar goal, which is to get back home, right? So anything we can do to enlighten people based on our own personal experiences or the ability to draw people like the near-death network that we've started on YouTube will do. That's what we're going to bring a collective of different personalities. Like we said, people who have experienced the near-death experiences, spiritually transformative experiences, but also regular lay people, the people that I've met in sports, the people in entertainment who have their own perspective. Some are traditional evangelicals. That's fine. Everybody's got their own right to their opinion. But I think the more you as NDEers and me as a conveyor of information move the needle for people to at least open the door, to be open to the potential for how much their spirit individually impacts collectively the status of this planet. I think that's important. So that's what we're passionate about Bud, Ed, and I, in bringing this content to people's attention so that we can have kind of a foundation to go forward with. Because as you stated earlier, and we know, if you look at the world today, you're thinking, geez, it's going to hell in a handbasket. There is no answer. We're just all doomed. And I don't feel that way at all.
I don't feel that way either. And if the two of us don't feel that way, maybe there's two other people that don't feel that way and two more. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm wondering if maybe you can share about somebody that you've already interviewed or somebody that you've heard their story that was really pivotal in you accepting this information. I think that there's so many people who maybe weren't taught to practice open-mindedness, myself included. And so I really needed some evidential things to happen, to hear some experiences that were just, they blew my mind. I mean, my own was very helpful as well. But I'm wondering for you, if there's something that really sticks out for you that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I was very directed somehow by spirit to go to the Unity Church here in Mesa, Arizona. This was probably 7 years ago, to hear speakers, one of which was Barbara Bartolome, who has the IANDS group in Santa Barbara. If you don't know her, she's a wonderful individual, just beautiful spirit, had a really spiritually transformative experience that you can read online. And she, after the address, went in to sign her book, and I was talking to her husband, Victor. And Victor's 7 feet tall. He played professional basketball, and their love story is a wonderful one. And I was telling him about my desire to do a television series, but I was looking specifically to balance some of the females involved with a male host. And she said, well, you need to talk to my wife because Barbara knows everybody in this space. I said, okay. So we talked afterwards, and she directed me to Jeff Olsen, who moved, ironically enough, down here to Arizona 2 months before I had this interaction with Barbara. So I called Jeff up, And I look at his story and I said, before you say no to this, what I'm going to ask you, Jeff. And Jeff says, well, you haven't even asked me anything. How do you know? So I had already gone in kind of pessimistic because I've been rebuffed on several occasions. The Sportscaster wants to do metaphysics. Yeah, sure, whatever. But I called Jeff up. Jeff becomes our co-host for this pilot. And his story is remarkable. I mean, he was in creative marketing for many years and still is at BYU TV. He's their director of creative services. But at the time, he was in southern Utah with his wife and 2 young boys. On the way back, he nodded off to Salt Lake City. The car rolled. His wife passed. His infant son passed. But he and his son, Spencer, survived. And his wife at the crash scene came to him and said, it's not your time. You need to stay for Spencer. You're fine to go. You have my blessing to go forward. I'm perfect. And he articulates that in his book. But his story was one that I think kind of outlines a lot of what you went through and a lot of near-death experience individuals who have had their world blown up, in his case, literally, go through. He came back. He could not talk about this experience for 10 years. It was too painful. He had had 32 surgeries. He had a leg amputated. He was in a spot where he had lost the love of his life. He lost his baby. You know, it was very, very challenging. So 10 years later, he finally comes out and feels more comfortable and has become a worldwide speaker, very empathetic, very sweet. And from the standpoint of a male, to be able to articulate those characteristics in public, sometimes it's very challenging for us men to get out of our own way, right? And to be able to cry, to be able to be emotional, to be able to be vulnerable. And he did all those things. So he checked all the boxes. So we've been on this road along with one of his best friends, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, who ran the trauma center where they brought him after he had this accident. And Jeff has left traditional medicine. He's in the healing space right now. So he was a clinician who's always been a metaphysician and having these experiences his whole life. So in this channel, I think what we would like to do is also visit with clinicians and academicians, because a lot of people need to give the license to be able to believe these experiences, right? Especially men, I think. If you look at people like Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, and then you look at Bruce Grayson, and you look at Kenneth Ring and Jeffrey Long, you know, and Raymond Moody, who really kind of gave the acronym to the space, even though these experiences have been happening since for millennia. So for the men to be able to have license a lot of times to sample these, they need people like myself and people who have already been in a traditional market segment and who look at the veracity of these experiences from a lot of different lenses. And I think that's kind of what shaped me. So that's a long-winded way of saying Jeff Olsen's experience really kind of pushed me down this road.
Thanks for sharing that. He does have an amazing story, and he is such a kind soul to be around. I want to ask you, this question's coming up for me. I don't know if you're going to have an answer for it. We can edit this later if this doesn't work, but I'm wondering, how do sports and spirituality, like is there a thread to tie them together? Have you thought of any analogies for this?
Well, I think, like I was talking about earlier, there's always hope. So that's a common thread between the two spaces. What sports is a game. The game is over and you get another opportunity until you get to the championship level, right? So let's just say for the day-to-day sports level, like my girls both played club soccer. And I think it taught them discipline. It taught them how to win and lose graciously. It taught them about the pain of losing and that they don't necessarily want to be there. And how can they lift up their own individual performances collectively for the team? So that's kind of the thread. I think if we as individual sparks of divinity can bring our own gifts to the table and all collaborate, I think we can raise the consciousness of the planet in that kind of a format.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I was just thinking about getting to the champion level of the game, like with reincarnation. So if you think of Earth as a game too, the sports analogy fits there too. Thanks for sharing that. I just want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about our time together. It can be totally off topic or still around what we're talking about. This is just your space to share.
Well, from my perspective as a father and a husband, my family is paramount. I have two brothers. My mother's still alive. She just celebrated her 90th birthday. And I think the family of the planet is the larger, it's the macrocosm, right? But at the microcosm level, if you walk and talk your game, there's a quote in the Bible, and I'm not trying to be evangelical, but I think it's appropriate. Faith without works is dead. You and I can have this great discussion about raising the consciousness of the planet. But if I go out and, get cited for drunk driving and run into somebody and cause a major accident, or like in your instance, you said when you came back, your drug dealer was gone. All the people that you depended on for your old way of life had vanished. And that's how spirit works, right? So if we can all in unison do the things that we do well, and we don't necessarily all do the same things well. I don't have the story you have to be able to talk about. I mean, your story, for those of you who don't know, you need to check Betty's story out, because it could be a movie script. And then people would say, this is too fantastical to even be a movie. So people like yourself, and I think myself, we all bring different gifts to the table. It's my goal to be the best father and husband that I can be for Susanna and Marissa and Erica, who are my daughters, but also to be able to bring my gifts to bear and to come out of the closet, as it were, and put myself on the line with a lot of people who might say, oh, this is kind of crazy stuff. What are you doing that? I don't think it is. I think it's all about the evolution of consciousness and the soul on this plane of existence while we're here. And whatever we can do as a group to make that happen, I'm all in.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Thank you for your courage, for stepping out and making content around this and being so brave. And thank you for sharing and introducing yourself to our community. The link to your to the Near Death Network will be in the liner notes of this episode, along with how to get a hold of you. And I just want to thank you again so much for your contribution to our community today. And we'll see you next time.
Same to you. Namaste, Buddha.